I buried my husband, and 5 days later, my own family tried to bury me in lies. They failed. Now, they'll remember my name for the rest of their lives. Subscribe. You don't want to miss this one. My name is Anna Mae Johnson. I am 68, and my house in Atlanta still smells like lilies and pine from the funeral sprays that crowded our parlor 5 days ago. The black dress I've been rotating since the service is getting shiny at the elbows, and when I wash my hands, a soft trace of rose still rises from my skin, as if grief has a perfume all its own. I heard voices in the hallway before I saw the faces. Not his baritone, God keep him, but the clipped, bustling chorus of the living. They weren't talking about Harold. They were talking about me. She's still breathing? Thought she'd have gone by now. My eldest grandson Daryl joked, the way some boys laugh at their own meanness to see if it will grow into a personality. Maybe we should check her pulse right during the will reading. Laughter rolled down the stairs like a dropped marble, bright, careless, and headed for damage. I stood at the foot of the staircase holding the banister Harold polished every spring. He'd rub the wood with lemon oil in an old shirt, humming off-key while the house soaked up the shine. From there I could see my family fan through the entrance like realtors at a showing. They had sticky notes in sherbet colors, melon, mango, and that aggressive traffic cone orange. I watched my granddaughter Kendra tack an orange square onto Harold's grandmother clock, the one that ticked through 2 wars and 4 marriages, then onto my tufted wingback, then onto the china cabinet we bought for our silver anniversary. Her phone's camera app flicked on. She paced and measured, eyes narrowed like a general surveying high ground. This room's going to be a spa once she moves out, Kendra announced. We'll open the walls for more light. My daughter-in-law, Chantel, breezed in with a tray of champagne flutes, bubbles like little helium balloons ferrying away good behavior. We're celebrating Harold's legacy, she said. He built an empire. Now we'll carry it forward. And sweep out the ghosts, someone murmured. Laughter again. I was apparently a ghost they could still hear. They had replaced my place at the dining table with a folding chair that wobbled on one leg. Less strain on your back, Mama Anna, someone said, nudging me toward the laundry room to be away from the noise. Back there, beside the mop bucket and the iron-streaked sink, they perched a paper plate on my knees. Strip of dry chicken, spoon of potato that tasted like the tub had been scraped bare of salt and mercy. From the next room came the rhythm of their plans. This house smells like mothballs and endings. We'll rip out the kitchen, skim the walls. Can we get her mail to keep the pension checks coming? Kendra called, quick as a small blade. Laughter again. I wrapped both hands around my cup so they couldn't see the tremor in my fingers. Then I slid my palm into the pocket of my cardigan and pressed the folded edge of a single piece of paper, the document they didn't know about. 15 years old. Bank stamped, notarized, and quiet as a heartbeat in a crowded room. The trust. My name beside Harold's. Not as wife, not as beneficiary, but as co-founder and investor. The secret we agreed to keep to protect his pride and my peace. There is a certain kind of meal only a widow can taste. Every bite is salted by memory and swallowed past a throat that aches with words that won't help. If I stood and shouted, I would be the mad old woman. If I wept, I would be the burden guessed at, confirmed. So I did what Southern women do when the storm cracks. I sat upright, drank water, and listened. Once, in a year so lean we joked about eating the paper bills, I sold my mother's gold bangles and the emerald string Harold gifted me after our first tax refund. I took off our wedding bracelets and slid them across a glass counter I couldn't see through for the tears. That cash propped Harold's business through a winter when creditors circled like crows. I told no one. Harold promised my name would be guarded. He kept that promise with the ferocity of a man who knew the difference between shelter and show. Now my children handled my life as if I were already gone, sticky notes fluttering like plucked feathers. My son, Marcus, sat with his knee bouncing, impatient, already counting what he thought he owned. Chantel leaned to whisper in his ear, smile sharp enough to cut a lemon. "She won't get a dime," Marcus said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Don't worry." I have learned that people announce their character via their volume. Whisperers often carry knives. Shouters carry less imagination than they think. The only thing I carried into the lawyer's office later that day was that folded sheet and the weight of a marriage built plank by plank across decades. They seated me at the end of the polished conference table under an abstract painting, blue blocks pressing on smaller red ones like a storm pinning a barn. Marcus took the chair nearest the attorney with the grin of a boy who believes the birthday cake is his because he saw it first. The others filled in, cell phones flat on the table like additional hands. Mr. Henderson, Harold's attorney, pursed his lips and opened the leather case with the patience of an organist exposing pipes. He placed a small digital recorder between two crystal water glasses. When he pressed play, Harold's voice poured into the room, smoky and kind, the way it had sounded when he read the paper aloud so I'd hear the funny parts. "If my son speaks one ill word about his mother," Harold said, "subtract $1 million per word." The room went so quiet I could hear the recorder's tiny gears. No one moved. Mr. Henderson tapped a page. "By our count, that brings deductions totaling $88 million. Marcus's smile unraveled. Chantel stopped breathing. Kendra dropped her phone. The thud sounded like punctuation at the end of a sentence none of them wanted to read. We weren't even at the surprising part. But I won't get ahead of myself. If you think the floor can't fall twice, you haven't lived long enough. I wish I could tell you I'd planned what happened next. Truth is, a secret I had tucked away to protect my husband's dignity stepped out into the light and began to roar. Stay with me, because the way this turns will make you sit up straighter at your own kitchen table. Mr. Henderson flipped another page. Primary beneficiary of the Johnson Family Trust and holder of intellectual property and company control, he read, is my wife, Anna Mae Johnson. The pen I'd been turning in my hand stilled. I didn't need the paper in my pocket anymore. Still, I kept my fingers there, touching the proof of a life I had poured into someone else's name and now received back under my own. Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Henderson said, sliding a folder toward me. These are the stock portfolios, patent assignments, and letters your husband left you. I did not look at my son. I looked at the grain of the table, at the small nick near my elbow that proved expensive things still survive by tolerating scars. I opened Harold's letter last. His handwriting leaned left, as if he were walking back to me across a windy field. Forgive the years I kept you in the shade, he wrote. You were the beam. Let them learn your name. At my age, victory doesn't taste like fireworks. It tastes like water, simple, clean, restoring. I folded the letter, placed it against my heart, and lifted my eyes to my family. So, I said, who wants to check my pulse now? What Mr. Henderson revealed after that would change where every person in that room slept the following week. Do you still want to see how the stickers came off the furniture? The first thing you learn about wealth is how loud it makes people. The second is how fast it quiets them when the river changes course. After Mr. Henderson named me beneficiary, the whole table cinched inward, as if the air had stepped back and left everyone holding themselves up. Marcus tried to laugh, but it came out like a cough. Chantel adjusted her blazer and then adjusted it again, trying to find a version of herself that belonged in this new weather. "There must be a mistake," she said finally, targeting Mr. Henderson as if he were a fly to be stilled with paperwork. Harold always mentored Marcus for leadership. Mr. Henderson steepled his fingers. Mentorship is not ownership, and Mr. Johnson's instructions are not ambiguous. Kendra, poor child raised on smoothies and certainty, reached for her phone. "So, the house?" she asked, brows pitched high. "Because I was mapping a wellness space and—" "The house," Mr. Henderson said, slipping on reading glasses that made his voice even drier, "is not part of probate. It sits within the trust control now vested in Mrs. Johnson." I've never loved a pair of eyeglasses more. There was, however, one last envelope to open, a thick sealed parcel Harold had instructed to be delivered after initial shock, which Mr. Henderson seemed to judge arrived promptly. He slid it cleanly and shook out documents like a magician calling doves, time-stamped memos, ink-heavy diagrams, and a stapled essay with the clumsy title, "Proposal for Public Offering, Johnson Dynamics, Anonymous Author." I felt the oxygen tilt. The anonymous author had been me. 15 years earlier, the economy staggered and Harold's manufacturing contracts bled. He slept in his chair with spreadsheets as blankets. I couldn't bear to watch the light go out behind his eyes, so I sat at the kitchen table with a pot of coffee and wrote until sunrise. I wasn't trained, but I was stubborn. I read business books from the library, asked a banker I trusted how oxygen moves through corporations, and braided intuition with research. I mailed the plan under a pseudonym to Harold's board, and then, because shame can wear the mask of loyalty, I never confessed. The board adopted it, polished it, and stamped his name on the glossy cover that changed our fortunes. "Analysis shows," Mr. Henderson said gently, "that essay is yours, Mrs. Johnson. Ink, paper stock, postal route. Even the indentation pattern matches your old typewriter. The patent filed under that pseudonym," he tapped another sheaf, "throws off $9 million per year. It is now reassigned to you." Marcus leaned forward, palms flat. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying," Mr. Henderson replied, "your mother is not a footnote in your father's empire. She is the co-author and now the owner. Grief is a room with many doors, some open to tears, some to numbness, and some, God help us, to clarity sharp enough to cut." I watched my son discover that his mother existed beyond the role he'd written for me. Cook, comforter, the soft place the family landed when they needed a place to fall. He stared as if I'd grown two heads instead of finally raising the one I'd always kept bowed. When the meeting broke, Mr. Henderson slid me a separate document, his finger discreetly tracing the signature line. "Per your instructions," he murmured, "notice to vacate, 72 hours for all non-owners and non-invitees." Chantel's smile was back, calcified now. "You can't put your own family out," she said, sweet as tea that sours at the bottom of the glass. "I can't?" I asked. "Then who moved me to the laundry room?" In the car ride home, the city looked younger than me. Oak trees shook off pollen like confetti. A child in a red raincoat leapt into a puddle and came up laughing. The world goes on even when your house tilts. I pressed my palm to my chest where Harold's letter rested. "My love, you kept your promise. Now I will keep mine to myself." The house received me like a long-suffering friend, a sigh of hinges, the coolness of shaded wood. I found the orange sticky notes first. One on the clock, one on the chair, 6 on the china cabinet because greed never trusts its own claim. I peeled each off slowly and smoothed them on a single sheet of paper, an ugly bouquet I intended to throw away later like any wilted thing. Then I walked room to room, reclaiming the history I had ironed, dusted, and paid for. Not with checks alone, with years. I gave them the notice that evening. Marcus read it as if it were written in a language he refused to learn. 72 hours, he said. This is ridiculous. What was ridiculous, I replied, was deciding a spa would replace the room where I nursed your father through pneumonia. Dad would never. Dad did, I said softly, and watched anger falter where truth stood up. If you're waiting for the moment the boxes hit the porch, you're not wrong. But first came the hour I had dreaded and earned, the conversation no mother imagines and every mother deserves, the kind that makes or breaks the spine of a family. Keep listening, because what I told my son next took our story somewhere even I hadn't dared go. Marcus paced, keys jangling like a tiny alarm. So what? What do you want from us? An apology? Fine, I'm sorry you heard jokes. I held up a hand. I don't need an apology shaped like a lifeline for your pride. I need accountability. I need distance. I need you to leave this house until you remember how to treat a woman who built the roof you stand under. Chantel scoffed. So this is about power. This, I said, is about memory. You all forgot mine. I'm just returning it. Kendra, to her credit, lingered after the others stormed out. Grandma, she whispered, eyes wet, I didn't know you wrote anything. I don't know what I thought. I know what you were taught, I said, by a house that ran so smoothly you mistook labor for magic. She pressed her cheek to my shoulder in a clumsy deer hug, then slipped away. Alone, I sorted through decades. I found the emerald necklace box, empty, lined in velvet the color of new leaves. I touched the absence like a blessing. You did what you had to, Anna. You do what you must. That night, I sat in Harold's chair and read his letter again. Let them learn your name. The next morning, I called a realtor. By afternoon, I called a locksmith. By evening, I called a moving company and scheduled the kind of pack-out that leaves ghosts with nowhere to perch. At sunrise, I watered the pomegranate bush out back and the little rose bush we planted when Marcus turned 5. The ground drank like someone grateful. We'll bloom again, I told the rose, and it's possible I was speaking to both of us. By the 3rd day, the house was quiet in a way that wasn't empty. It was calm like a church. After everyone has filed out and the echo belongs to the rafters, their boxes had left, their stickers were gone, their sour laughter had no walls to bounce from. I made tea in my kitchen, and sat at my table, and listened to a silence that wasn't punishment. It was relief. The next surprise came the following week, though, and I'll admit it made me laugh out loud in my brand new calm. You'll want to hear about the ocean and the patent checks and the wood-carved sign on my new door, but first, what kind of woman am I if I don't tell you who came knocking with a plan to take it all back? Who do you think tried to have me declared incompetent? And what do you suppose I had waiting for them when they did? The first knock came on a Wednesday when the air was the color of dishwater and thunder kept threatening to make good on its promises. I was labeling boxes with a thick black marker, linens, cookware, photos, when 2 figures in navy suits appeared on my front step with clipboards and expressions tuned to concerned but firm. A third person, a woman in a coral blouse, hung back near the hydrangeas and pretended to study the leaves. I knew a performance when I saw one. I had ironed shirts for church plays and watched boys forget their lines with that exact same earnest panic frozen onto their faces. "Mrs. Johnson?" the taller man asked, flashing a badge like a magician showing you the empty hat. "Fulton County Adult Protective Services. We received an anonymous report about your welfare and decision-making capacity." "Anonymous is the coward's favorite font," I said, opening the screen door and letting their rehearsed air conditioning drift past me. "Wipe your feet." They came in careful, eyes snagging on the boxes like burrs. The woman from the hydrangeas followed, introducing herself as a nurse contractor for the county, there for a brief cognitive assessment. Behind her at the end of the walkway, I spotted Marcus's sedan idling, sunlight sliding along its hood like oil. The windows were up, but I knew my own boy's silhouette the way a mother knows her own handwriting. "Mrs. Johnson," the nurse said, taking a seat I didn't offer, "we've had reports of confusion, potential financial exploitation, and an unsafe environment." "Confusion?" I set the marker down, cleanly capped. "I'm confused how a mother can be unsafe in the house she dusted for 40 years, but perhaps you can explain." The shorter man tightened his grip on the clipboard. "It should only take a moment. Could you tell us what day it is, where we are, and the name of the current president?" "I can do you one better," I said. "It's Wednesday. You're in my living room on Westview Terrace, tracking grit onto my Persian rug, and the president's name is not the one my son was betting on. Coffee?" They declined. "I made some anyway, because a woman's kitchen is her gavel." While it percolated, the nurse launched questions like softballs. "Spell a word backward, remember 3 items, count by 7s. I spelled chrysanthemum both ways for sport, recited tomorrow's grocery list from memory, and subtracted myself all the way down to a number that would have insulted me if it were anyone's bank balance but a politician's. When they asked if anyone helped me manage money, I set the pot on the trivet and let the steam rise like an amen. "I still balance a checkbook because it feels like prayer," I said. "I pay my bills online, I read every line on a contract twice, and my accountant calls me ma'am. If this is about the trust, I own it. If it's about the house, I control it. If it's about the patent, I wrote it." The nurse's eyebrows climbed as if to get a better view. The APS men glanced at one another, 2 sailors realizing the water was deeper than their boots. The taller one cleared his throat. "We also had concerns about neglect, food hygiene, that sort of thing." I slid open the pantry to show labeled jars, rice, beans, flour, like soldiers at attention. I led them to the refrigerator, eggs with their ends up, greens washed and spun, a jar of peach preserves I'd won at a church auction, still wearing its ribbon. "There's leftover chicken salad under the foil," I said. "From a recipe in Southern living, adjusted to account for the fact that life is too short for too much mayonnaise." By the time they left, apologizing into their own hands, the hydrangea woman had softened into somebody with decent parents. "I'm sorry if this was upsetting," she said at the door. "Sometimes families misunderstand each other." "Misunderstanding is when you bring me whole milk instead of 2%, I said. "Thee was an ambush disguised as concern." She looked toward the street. Marcus's sedan slid away, pretending not to have been there, the way a child hides by closing his eyes. The nurse wrote something on her clipboard and met my gaze. "If anyone else comes by with papers you don't understand," she said, "call a lawyer you trust." "I already have one," I said, "and a memory that bites." They left me with the sound of cicadas sawing at the noon light. I poured myself a small coffee and sipped it at the kitchen window, watching a squirrel make complex decisions about my bird feeder. Somewhere inside me, a string that had been taut since Harold's last breath loosened. It did not break. It would not. At 2 o'clock, Chantel called. We're deeply concerned, she began, skipping hello like it charged by the word. It's not normal to make rash decisions at your age. Rash is wearing new shoes to a funeral, I said. This is planning. You're letting this power go to your head, she snapped. Marcus grew up in that house. He has a right. Marcus grew up because I kept a roof steady when storms tried to lift it off like a bad hat, I said. Rights are not born from wishes. Silence. Then the tone of a woman remembering her script. We'll be filing an emergency petition with the court to assume temporary guardianship for your safety. For my safety, I repeated, tasting each word as if it might be poison. Bring your papers, bring your friends, bring your best lipstick. You'll want to look nice when the judge sees you lose. After I hung up, I called Mr. Henderson. He answered on the second ring, as if he'd been taking a breath for this exact conversation. Ah, he said, the guardianship gambit. They always try it before brunch. What do we do? I asked, already knowing the answer but needing the warm shape of it in my ear. We do not blink, he said. We assemble documentation, medical records, bank statements, living will, durable power of attorney, yours, not theirs. We schedule an assessment with your own physician, someone who doesn't mistake boundary setting for dementia. And if they file, we respond with teeth. I sharpened mine, I said, on a lifetime of being told to hush. We spent the next hour on a phone-blessed scavenger hunt through my filing cabinet. I pulled folders like a magician pulling scarves, insurance, mortgage paid, taxes, past 10 years. My fingers found the living will Harold and I had drafted the same summer we learned the difference between cholesterol numbers and bad luck. My name sat on the durable power of attorney line, quiet as a cat in the sun. When the doorbell rang a second time, the afternoon had leaned into heat and decided to stay there. I opened it to find Pastor Ruth from New Hope Baptist, wearing a dress the color of green tea and carrying a casserole that could have fed a choir. I heard voices, she said, eyes flicking toward the clipboard. Ghosts who had visited earlier thought my presence might mess up the devil's choreography. Come in, I told her. I'm learning new steps. We sat at the table, the one whose varnish I had renewed every few years with the steady devotion other people gave to holiday newsletters. Pastor Ruth held my hands and prayed the way old trees might pray if they could, roots deep, words older than the fence lines. Then she looked at me with that gaze that sorts fluff from wool. "How's your heart?" she asked. "Stubborn," I said. "It wants to forgive. It is not ready to forget, and it has started the process of throwing people out and not apologizing for the noise." She smiled, heat lightning in her eyes. Boundaries are the shape of love, too. We ate warm casserole right from the dish with mismatched forks like girls with secrets. I told her about the will reading, the patent, the orange stickers, APS. When I got to the part about guardianship, something fierce and amused ran across her face. "Child," she said, not to insult, but to gather. "They want to drag you into court to declare you incapable while you're quoting bylaws by paragraph." "I intend to give the judge a show. Give the judge the truth," she said. "Truth knows how to dance without music." After she left, I went upstairs and opened the cedar chest at the foot of our bed. The smell of old wood and camphor did to memory what a good choir does to sorrow, arranged it into something the heart could hold. Inside lay the life I had packed in soft tissue. Harold's Letterman sweater with the elbow worn thin as good humor, our wedding album yellowing at the edges, the empty velvet box where the emerald necklace once slept. I placed the letter he'd written me atop the stack, like a blessing closing a book. Sunset found me on the back steps, feet in old slippers, watching the pomegranate bush blush in the evening. The rose we planted for Marcus cupped a tight bud, stubborn and private. I watered it anyway. Love is not a contract that ends when one party defaults. It's a practice, like scales on a piano, rehearsed whether or not anyone's listening. The petition arrived the next morning by courier who wore pity like cologne. "Have a blessed day," he said, as if the words might make mercy out of the envelope. I signed neatly, thanked him, and set the packet on the table. The first page bristled with allegations: undue influence, impaired cognition, financial recklessness. Each lie stood there in legal font, trying on dignity the way a stray dog tries on a ribbon. I stacked the evidence to answer each lie: letters from my physician, bank statements with balances that behave themselves, copies of contracts signed with a hand steadier than some men's promises. Mr. Henderson collected it all like a librarian who loved a sharp index. "We'll meet Friday," he said. "They'll think the courthouse is a stage. We'll treat it like a ledger." Friday. The word took up a chair at my table and sat with me through dinner. I made black-eyed peas and cornbread because ritual fortifies in ways calcium never could. I cleaned the kitchen like a woman expecting good company. I set out the clothes I would wear: navy suit, silk scarf the color of wet magnolia leaves, low heels that could walk the length of a lifetime without blistering. I tucked Harold's letter into my purse, not for the judge, but for my spine. I slept the way a stubborn sea sleeps. Resting, yes, but listening for weather. In the courthouse hallway, Marcus wasn't alone, and the person standing beside him had once eaten at my table and called me mother. Guess who decided to testify that I had always been forgetful, and what little recording I carried that afternoon could turn their words into dust. The courthouse on Friday smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and paper warmed under fluorescent light, the kind of scent that made you wonder how many lives had been folded, filed, and judged here. Mr. Henderson walked beside me, his briefcase swinging like a metronome set to unshakable. My navy suit felt like armor, the silk scarf at my throat a small private banner. In my purse, between my checkbook and a tin of peppermints, Harold's letter weighted like a spine I could touch. Marcus was already there. He stood at the far end of the hall, talking in low tones to Chantel, who wore a cream pantsuit that looked ready for a magazine spread on how to appear gracious while gutting someone. But it wasn't her that caught my breath. It was the man beside them. Arthur Kane. My late husband's former business partner, a man who had once eaten barbecue at my table, who had taught my boy to tie a bowline knot, and who had, in the final years before Harold's death, slipped quietly out of our lives under a cloud of creative differences and suspected fraud. The last time we'd spoken, he'd assured me, with syrupy sincerity, that he'd never take Harold's side over mine. And now, here he was, shaking Marcus's hand, his smile as smooth as a skipped stone. The clerk called our case number. We filed in. Marcus and his team on one side, me and Mr. Henderson on the other. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, the judge's bench elevated enough to remind everyone where authority lived. Judge Foster, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses low on her nose, peered at us as if she could smell motive like a bloodhound. Marcus's attorney, a man with gelled hair and a tie patterned like a chessboard, opened with honeyed concern. "Your Honor, my client only wishes to ensure his mother's safety and well-being. In recent months, Mrs. Johnson has made hasty financial decisions, alienated her family, and displayed troubling forgetfulness." He nodded to Arthur, who took the stand with all the solemnity of a Sunday deacon. "I've known Anna May for 30 years, he began, voice dripping with faux regret. But she's always been, well, a bit forgetful. Details slip, numbers confuse her. I remember a time I didn't let myself glare. I let him keep talking, rope unwinding from his own mouth. When Mr. Henderson rose for cross-examination, his movements were unhurried, almost lazy. "Mr. Kane," he said, "you testified that Mrs. Johnson has always been forgetful. Would you say that about the years she kept the company books, balancing accounts to the penny?" Arthur's mouth twitched. I wasn't involved in that." "No, you weren't," Mr. Henderson said mildly. "In fact, isn't it true you were asked to step away from Johnson Dynamics finances after certain irregularities appeared under your oversight?" Objection from Marcus's lawyer. Overruled. "And isn't it also true," Henderson continued, "that on April 14th, 2 years ago, you left a voicemail for Mrs. Johnson asking her to find those old contracts before the auditors do? Would hearing that voicemail refresh your memory?" I watched Arthur's throat bob as Mr. Henderson pressed play on a small recorder. The courtroom filled with Arthur's voice, unmistakable in its urgency. "Anna May, you've got to help me. Don't let them see page 4. Call me back." Silence followed. Thick enough to butter. Judge Foster leaned forward. "Mr. Kane, you may step down." Chantel's face had gone still in that way a person's face does when they're calculating new math in real time. Marcus wouldn't look at me. When it was my turn, Mr. Henderson guided me through questions designed less to defend and more to demonstrate. My daily routines, the financial ledgers I kept, the correspondence I'd handled with suppliers, even in Harold's last months. We submitted letters from my doctor and my CPA. I spoke plainly, neither performing strength nor apologizing for it. "Mrs. Johnson," Judge Foster asked finally, "why do you believe your son filed this petition?" I met Marcus's eyes across the room. "Because I stopped letting other people write my story," I said. "And when you've been edited out for long enough, claiming your own name can look like madness to those who benefited from your silence." The judge's gavel came down like punctuation. Petition denied. Outside, the air was sharp with the first hints of autumn. Marcus and Chantel walked ahead without looking back. Arthur peeled away down another sidewalk, phone already at his ear. Mr. Henderson exhaled. "You fought that well." "I didn't fight," I said. "I told the truth. It just happened to have sharper teeth than their lies." "You think that was the end?" "It wasn't. Because 2 nights later, someone left a padded envelope at my door. No return address, no note. And what I found inside changed not just the fight, but the battlefield itself. The envelope was the kind of beige that pretends to be harmless. Padded, slightly bulky, edges worn as if it had traveled far, but in no hurry. No return address, just my name in black block letters that didn't try for friendliness. It sat on my front mat in the cold light of early morning, dew clinging to its corners like a warning. I didn't bring it inside right away. Years of running a household and months of fending off my own blood had taught me that sometimes the thing in front of you is easier to face once you've fed yourself. I set coffee to brew, buttered toast, and only then carried the envelope to the kitchen table, placing it beside Harold's letter as if the two could talk about their contents when I wasn't looking. The tape peeled away too easily, like it wanted to be caught. Inside, a stack of photographs bound with a thin rubber band, a USB drive, and a single sheet of paper with 4 words printed in bold, no signature, no greeting. Thought you should know. The photographs smelled faintly of toner in someone else's house. The first showed Marcus standing outside a restaurant I recognized from downtown, leaning in close to Arthur Kane. Both were smiling. Not in the polite way of men shaking hands for business, but in the sharp, private way of people congratulating themselves. The next few were of documents spread across a table, balance sheets, title deeds, something that looked like a draft sale agreement for the house I was still living in. My name was circled in red on more than one page. By the fourth photo, I was looking at a shot of a conference room. Marcus, Chantel, Arthur, and two strangers I didn't know sat around a glossy table littered with coffee cups and legal pads. On the wall, a whiteboard had my patent number scrawled across the top. Under it, the words transfer plan in black marker. The USB drive felt warm in my hand, though I knew it was just the heat of my imagination. I hesitated. Plugging strange devices into my computer was how people wound up with frozen screens and regret, but curiosity beat caution. The folder on the drive contained 3 audio files. The first was muffled, but Arthur's voice came through. Once she's declared incompetent, we can execute the transfer. You'll get the property, I'll take the patent rights, and she won't have standing to fight. Marcus replied, tone flat as a ledger line. Just make sure the judge buys it. She's sharper than she looks. The second file was Chantel speaking to someone I didn't recognize. She thinks Harold left her all that out of love. She doesn't realize we've been setting this up for months. I stopped the playback before the third file. My hands were steady, but something deeper, a part of me I'd thought was exhausted, was starting to hum. This was no longer about insults over folding chairs or jokes in the laundry room. This was theft in planning, a dismantling of my life while I was still breathing in it. I called Mr. Henderson. He answered before the first ring finished. I've got something, I said. I like the sound of that, he replied. Photos, audio, written proof they're conspiring to strip me of assets. Silence on his end, but the good kind, calculating. We'll need to authenticate everything, he said. Chain of custody, metadata. But if this holds, it's not just defense, it's offense. Civil, maybe criminal. As we spoke, I kept staring at the last photograph in the stack. Marcus, caught mid-laugh, leaning back in a chair that wasn't his in a room I didn't know. The light fell on his face just enough to show the lines Harold used to get when he was lying to save face. Only this wasn't saving anything. You sure you want to go to war? Henderson asked. I'm past wanting, I said. I'm drafting the terms. That evening, I set the photographs in order and slid them into a fresh envelope, one with my attorney's name on it this time. The original stayed with me. Harold's letter sat atop them in the drawer, as if giving his blessing. Around 9, my phone lit up with a number I didn't know. I let it ring out. No voicemail. A few minutes later, a text arrived. You don't understand what you're doing. Stop before it's too late. No name, no punctuation beyond that. I didn't reply. But I did go to the front door, check the locks twice, and draw the curtains tight. The house was quiet except for the pomegranate tree brushing against the siding in the wind. I went to bed with the USB drive under my pillow like some twisted fairy tale. The next morning, I woke to find tire tracks in the dew on my driveway. They led in, looped once, and led out again. Whoever left those tracks didn't just drive by, they stopped long enough to watch. And the very next day, someone in this family would hand me a proposition so brazen it made the guardianship stunt look like a tea party. You'll want to hear what price they put on my silence. They came to me on a Sunday as if dressing it in the quietest day of the week might soften what they were about to do. The knock at my door was a slow, deliberate rhythm. 3 beats, pause, 3 more like someone who wanted to sound polite but still be heard in every corner of the house. I didn't answer right away. From the front window, I saw Marcus and Chantel standing side by side, their clothes sharp and neutral, their faces arranged in something just shy of friendly. Marcus had his hands in his pockets, but I could see the twitch in his jaw. Chantel's smile was the sort that works better on a realtor brochure than on a front porch. I opened the door just enough to rest my palm on the frame. "You're brave," I said. "We just want to talk." Marcus began. "Talking would have been easier before you dragged my name into court," I replied. Chantel took a small step forward like she thought proximity might sell the pitch. "We understand there's been misunderstandings," she said. Her voice dipped in that faux honey she used on church committees. "But we're here with a solution." I folded my arms. "I'm listening." Marcus glanced at her, then back at me. "We can make all of this go away. No more petitions, no more lawyers. You keep a stipend, enough to live comfortably anywhere you choose. In exchange," he paused, testing my eyes for weakness, "you transfer the patent rights and certain company assets to a holding group we're setting up. You'd still have your name on things, just not the decisions." I laughed. Not a chuckle, but the kind of laugh that shakes loose years of patience. "A stipend," I repeated, "like an allowance for the troublesome old woman." "It's generous," Chantel pressed, "more than some people in your position ever see." "My position?" I stepped fully into the doorway. "You mean the position of having built this empire beside Harold, of selling my own family heirlooms to keep your precious company alive, of watching the same people I fed and clothed circle me like scavengers the minute the man was in the ground?" Marcus's eyes hardened. "This is better than the alternative. If you take this deal, there won't have to be unpleasantness." I let the words hang between us, not because I needed time to think, but because I wanted him to hear his own threat echo back. "Marcus," I said finally, "you've already brought unpleasantness into my home, my name, my sleep. The only difference now is I've decided I won't leave the table without the whole feast." He shifted. The boy who once cried at age 7 when his kite got stuck in the magnolia tree flashing through for just a breath before the man with steel eyes returned. "You'll regret this," he said. "Not as much as you will," I replied and shut the door. Inside, the quiet pressed against me like an ally. I walked to the kitchen, brewed coffee, and slid the envelope with the photographs and USB back into the center of the table. My fingertips rested on Harold's letter, tracing the indentation of his pen strokes like a map. By noon, I was in Mr. Henderson's office. His desk was cleared except for a legal pad, a fountain pen, and the envelope I'd handed over earlier in the week. "They came to you," he said, not asking. "They offered me an allowance," I said, "in exchange for the bones of everything I built." He leaned back. "Then it's time we stop reacting and start directing. We file preemptively. Fraud, conspiracy, intent to defraud a trustee, and we'll leak just enough to make the right people nervous." I thought of Marcus's face when the judge denied his petition, of the pale line his mouth had drawn. "Make them sweat," I said. That night, as I was locking up, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Last chance. Say yes before Thursday." No signature, just that. I typed back one word. Never. Then I turned off the lights, poured myself a glass of wine, and let the house breathe with me. Somewhere outside, a car idled just long enough for me to notice. By Thursday, they wouldn't be sending offers. They'd be sending someone into my house. And they'd make the mistake of thinking I wouldn't be ready for them. Thursday arrived with the kind of heavy, colorless sky that made even the birds keep quiet. I woke before sunrise the way I had on every exam day of my youth and every court date in my later years, alert, sharp, carrying a strange calm I'd learned was my mind's way of preparing for trouble. The text from last night was still on my phone, black letters against white light. Last chance. Say yes before Thursday. Thursday was here, and I had already said never. I moved through the house with purpose, checking locks, sliding a small kitchen chair under the back door handle, making sure the old security camera Harold had installed was still aimed at the front walkway. I brewed coffee but didn't drink it. My appetite wasn't in the kitchen, it was in the anticipation. At 9:12 a.m., a white SUV rolled up to the curb. I knew the vehicle. Marcus had driven it before, though now someone else was behind the wheel. The man who stepped out wasn't family. He was tall, broad in the shoulders, wearing a black windbreaker zipped to his chin despite the mild weather. His eyes swept the house like he was cataloging entry points. He knocked once, hard enough to make the frame shudder, then tried the handle. When it didn't give, he circled to the side yard. The camera caught his profile. I watched from the upstairs hall window, silent. He tugged at the side gate, found it locked, and moved toward the back. That's when I slipped my hand into the drawer by the hallway table and closed my fingers around Harold's old police whistle. Not a weapon, but loud enough to turn every neighbor's head in a 5-house radius. As the man reached the laundry room door, I stepped onto the back porch, the whistle ready between my teeth, my phone in my free hand already dialing Mr. Henderson. "Your visitor's here," I said into the phone, eyes on the man. "Do I invite him in or let the police handle it?" Henderson's voice was steady. "Stay visible, call it in. We'll add trespassing to the list." The man froze when he saw me, then offered a thin smile as though we were neighbors meeting by accident. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, "Marcus sent me to collect some documents." "Tell Marcus," I replied, "that the only thing he's collecting from me is evidence." And then I blew the whistle, 3 sharp blasts that sliced the morning quiet in half. Windows opened on both sides of the street. Someone shouted, "You okay, Anna Mae?" The man turned on his heel, heading back to the SUV without another word. I snapped a photo of the license plate before he drove off. Within an hour, 2 police officers were at my table, jotting notes, looking over the photographs, the text messages, the printed transcripts of the audio from the USB. Henderson arrived midway through, briefcase in hand, face taut but satisfied. "This changes the shape of things," he said once the officers left. "We're not just defending anymore, we're going to the DA." That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Harold's letter open beside me. The lamp cast a warm circle of light on the words, and I found myself reading the same line over and over. "Now let them know your name." It wasn't just my name I was going to protect. It was my history, my years, my proof that I had been the spine in a story they wanted to rewrite without me. The DA's office took the case faster than I'd expected, but what I didn't know yet was that Marcus had already prepared his next move. And when it came, it didn't just target my assets, it targeted my freedom. The summons arrived on a Tuesday morning, hand-delivered by a deputy whose expression was more apology than authority. A crisp envelope, my name printed in block letters, the seal of Fulton County pressed into the corner, inside, State of Georgia versus Anna Mae Johnson. The charges, fraudulent misrepresentation, concealment of assets, and, most absurd of all, elder abuse. I read the words twice before they settled into my bones. Elder abuse. As if I had harmed someone, as if I were the predator and not the prey. The affidavit claimed I had coerced Harold in his declining health into transferring control of the patent and trust into my name. The complaint named Marcus as the concerned relative bringing the matter to light. There was a sworn statement from Arthur Kane, dripping with faux regret. I had my doubts about her for years, but I never imagined she'd manipulate Harold in his final days. And another from Chantel, her prose neat and cold. She isolated him, kept him from his family, and now hides behind legal documents she barely understands. I set the papers down slowly, my fingers steady even as my pulse thudded in my ears. They weren't just trying to strip me of what I'd earned, they were trying to paint me as a criminal, to erase not just my assets, but my dignity. Henderson was at my door within the hour. He scanned the papers, jaw tightening. "It's a bluff," he said, though his voice carried the kind of tension that meant it was more than that. "They're trying to put you on defense before we can put them on offense. They want headlines, not truth." "Then we give them headlines they can't live with," I said. By Thursday, we were in his downtown office, a fortress of dark wood and frame victories. Henderson had already lined up a forensic handwriting expert to verify Harold's signatures, a medical professional to testify to his mental acuity during the transfers, and, most crucially, the original recordings from the USB. The DA's investigators hadn't heard them yet. That was about to change. At the pretrial conference, Marcus sat across from me, his suit immaculate, his expression smug. He didn't look at me until the first audio file began to play. Arthur's voice filled the room. "Once she's declared incompetent, we can execute the transfer. You'll get the property, I'll take the patent rights, and she won't have standing to fight." A ripple went through the room. Marcus shifted, eyes darting to his attorney. The second file followed, Chantel, clear and undeniable. "She thinks Harold left her all that out of love. She doesn't realize we've been setting this up for months." When it ended, Henderson leaned forward, voice calm but lethal. "Your Honor, the state's case hinges on the idea that my client manipulated her late husband. What you just heard is her son, her daughter-in-law, and their co-conspirator planning to steal from her. We have timestamps, metadata, and corroborating photographs. We are prepared to file a motion for dismissal and a counterclaim for malicious prosecution." Judge Foster's gaze cut through the silence. "I suggest the state reconsider its position before this proceeds." By the end of the week, the charges were withdrawn, but the damage Marcus had hoped for, a public stain on my name, hadn't landed. If anything, the story spreading through the neighborhood painted him for what he was. That Friday evening, I stood in my backyard by the pomegranate tree. The sky was a bruised lavender, the air heavy with the scent of rain. I thought of Harold, of the nights we'd sat out here planning futures we never quite finished. I whispered into the wind. I kept my name. The next morning, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran a headline above the fold. "Matriarch outsmarts family in legal battle over fortune. Audio proof seals the case." Below it, my photograph. Hair silver, scarf bright, eyes steady, looked back at me. And for the first time since Harold's funeral, I felt the air in my lungs expand without weight. I didn't just survive their schemes, I ended them, and somewhere deep down I knew they'd never dare come for me again.